I'd be happy to. Here's a continuous, approximately 1,400-word emotional script with no headings, written in a storytelling style suitable for YouTube narration. Writing. Have you ever wondered how one small act of kindness could completely change someone's life? We often believe that miracles come from extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. But sometimes, the greatest miracle begins with something as simple as sharing a sandwich, offering a smile, or stopping long enough to notice someone everyone else has forgotten. This is the unforgettable story of a little girl whose kindness gave a lonely man not only hope, but the family he thought he had lost forever. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, an elderly man named Samuel walked slowly to the same wooden bench outside a neighborhood grocery store. His steps were slow, his shoulders were bent, and his clothes had become worn after years of living on the streets. He carried a small backpack that held everything he owned in the world. Most people passed by without looking at him. Some glanced away because they felt uncomfortable. A few dropped loose coins into the old paper cup beside him, but almost no one stopped to ask his name or hear his story. To everyone else, Samuel was just another homeless man. But years ago, his life had been completely different. He had owned a small repair shop where he fixed bicycles, lawnmowers, and anything people brought to him. He loved working with his hands. His customers trusted him because he was honest, and his neighbors respected him for his kindness. At home, he had a loving wife named Grace and a cheerful little boy named Daniel. Their house wasn't large, and they never had much money, but every evening they gathered around the dinner table, laughed together, and thanked God for another day. Samuel believed life would always stay that way. Then everything changed. Grace became seriously ill. The treatments were expensive, and Samuel sold nearly everything he owned to pay the hospital bills. He worked day and night, but despite every effort, Grace passed away. Her death shattered him. He tried to stay strong for Daniel, but grief slowly consumed him. His repair shop closed because he couldn't keep up with the work. Bills piled higher every month. Eventually, they lost their home. Daniel, still young, moved to another state with relatives who promised him a better future. At first, father and son exchanged letters. Then the letters became less frequent. One day they stopped coming altogether. Samuel searched for him, but every lead ended in disappointment. Years passed, and eventually he convinced himself that Daniel had forgotten him. Now all Samuel had left were memories. One rainy afternoon, dark clouds covered the sky as people hurried home carrying umbrellas. Samuel sat quietly on his bench, soaked by the cold rain because he didn't even own a jacket thick enough to keep him warm. He stared at the ground, wondering if anyone even knew he existed anymore. Just then, a small pair of bright yellow rain boots stopped in front of him. Samuel slowly looked up. Standing there was a little girl, no older than 7, holding a pink umbrella decorated with tiny butterflies. She looked at him with curious eyes instead of fear. "Hello," she said with a gentle smile. Samuel smiled back. "Hello, my name is Emma. What's yours?" For a moment, Samuel couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked him his name. "My name is Samuel." Emma looked into his eyes and asked, "Are you hungry?" Samuel hesitated before answering. "A little." Emma immediately sat beside him on the bench. She opened her colorful lunchbox and pulled out a neatly wrapped sandwich, an apple, and a chocolate chip cookie. "My mommy packed this for me," she said. "But we can share." Samuel quickly shook his head. "No, sweetheart, you need your lunch." Emma smiled. "My mommy says food always tastes better when someone else smiles too." She placed the sandwich into Samuel's hands before he could refuse again. His hands trembled. No one had shown him such genuine kindness in years. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, "Thank you." Emma simply smiled and continued eating her apple as if sharing her lunch was the most natural thing in the world. Before leaving, she waved happily. "I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Samuel." Samuel watched her disappear down the sidewalk. For the first time in many years, he felt something he thought had disappeared forever. Hope. The next afternoon, Emma returned. This time she brought an extra sandwich. The day after that, she brought warm soup in a small thermos. Soon, visiting Samuel became part of her daily routine after school. Sometimes they talked about birds building nests in nearby trees. Sometimes Samuel told stories about repairing old bicycles and teaching his son how to ride one. Emma listened carefully, asking endless questions and laughing at every funny detail. Little by little, Samuel stopped feeling invisible. His smile returned. One evening, Emma's parents asked why she always came home a little later than usual. She answered honestly, I've been having lunch with my friend Samuel. Her parents looked at each other. Who's Samuel? Her father asked. He's the old man by the grocery store. Concerned, they decided to meet him the following day. When they arrived, they expected someone angry or dangerous. Instead, they found a polite elderly man who stood up respectfully the moment they approached. Emma introduced everyone with excitement. This is my friend. Samuel thanked them for raising such a caring daughter. They spent nearly an hour talking. Samuel never asked them for money or favors. He simply enjoyed having someone willing to listen. By the end of the conversation, Emma's parents realized that behind Samuel's tired appearance was a man of honesty, dignity, and incredible strength. Over the following weeks, they began helping him in small ways. Emma's mother brought him clean clothes. Her father gave him a warm winter coat. One neighbor offered him a temporary room in a community shelter. Another donated a pair of sturdy shoes. Samuel accepted every gift with gratitude, promising himself that one day he would repay every kindness. One afternoon, Emma's father learned about Samuel's old repair business. I have a friend who owns a repair garage, he said. Would you like me to introduce you? Samuel's eyes widened. You think someone would hire me at my age? I think someone would be lucky to have you. A week later, Samuel started working part-time repairing bicycles and small engines. At first his hands were shaky. But muscle memory returned quickly. Customers appreciated his careful work and friendly smile. Every Friday, when Samuel received his paycheck, he felt something far greater than financial relief. He felt his dignity returning. He even saved enough money to rent a tiny apartment. It wasn't much, one bed, one table, one small kitchen, but to Samuel, it felt like a palace. Still, one empty place remained in his heart. He missed his son every single day. Emma often noticed the sadness in his eyes whenever he mentioned Daniel. One evening, she quietly asked her parents, "Do you think we could help Mr. Samuel find his son?" Emma's mother smiled gently. "We can certainly try." She began searching old records, social media, public directories, and community groups. Days turned into weeks. Several leads went nowhere. Then one afternoon she found a phone number connected to a man named Daniel whose age matched perfectly. She made the call. A man answered. When she explained who she was searching for, silence filled the phone. Finally, his voice broke. "My father, is he alive?" Tears rolled down her face. Yes. Daniel had spent years searching for Samuel after returning to their hometown, only to discover their old house had been demolished. Without money or reliable information, he had eventually lost hope. Neither father nor son had stopped loving each other. They had simply lost their way. The following weekend, Emma's family arranged a surprise. Samuel believed he was coming over for dinner. As he stepped into their living room, a man slowly stood from the couch. Neither spoke. Samuel stared in disbelief. "Daniel, Dad." Within seconds they were embracing each other with tears streaming down their faces. Years of pain disappeared into one unforgettable hug. "I'm so sorry," Daniel whispered. "I never stopped looking for you." Samuel held him tightly. "I thought I'd lost you forever." "You never lost me." Emma watched quietly from across the room. She smiled as both men cried openly without shame. Sometimes love doesn't need words. Sometimes a hug says everything. Months later, Samuel's life looked completely different. He continued working at the repair shop. He moved into a comfortable apartment near Daniel's home. Every Sunday they shared dinner together, laughing over stories from the past and making plans for the future. Emma visited often. She proudly called Samuel her adopted grandfather. On Thanksgiving, everyone gathered around one large table. There was turkey, mashed potatoes, homemade pie, and more laughter than the little dining room could contain. Samuel looked around the table. His son, his daughter-in-law, his grandchildren, Emma's parents. A family brought together by compassion instead of coincidence. Samuel stood slowly and raised his glass. "I've spent years believing the world had forgotten me," he said softly. Then one little girl stopped to ask if I was hungry. She didn't just share her lunch. She shared her heart. Because of that simple act of kindness, I found friendship, purpose, and finally my family again. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful." Everyone wiped away tears. Emma smiled and squeezed his hand. "My mommy says kindness always comes back." Samuel nodded. "She's absolutely right." As the evening ended and everyone gathered for one final family photograph, Samuel realized something important. The greatest gift he had received wasn't food, money, or even a home. It was being seen, being treated like a human being when the world had looked away. You never know what battle someone is fighting or what loss they carry inside. A smile, a kind word, or a few minutes of your time may seem small to you, but to someone else, it could be the beginning of a brand new life. If this story touched your heart, remember that kindness costs nothing, yet it has the power to heal broken hearts, restore hope, and bring families back together. The smallest act of compassion can become someone else's greatest miracle, and perhaps the next miracle begins with you. If you'd like, I can also write it in a more cinematic, Hollywood-style narration with stronger emotional dialogue and plot twists for higher audience retention.